All right, Cleveland is relatively calm today, a day after Officer Michael Brelo was acquitted in the shooting deaths of two unarmed citizens. However, things were tense for a bit last night when police in riot gear took to the streets and made 71 arrests. Meanwhile, some relatives of the victims are still proclaiming no justice, no peace. In fact, the U.S. Justice Department announced shortly after the verdict that it would review the case. CNN legal analyst Philip Holloway joining me now. So, Philip, if indeed the Justice Department says they want to review the case, what is it that they're going to focus on?
They're going to focus on, in this particular case, whether or not his actions were objectively reasonable. The U.S. Supreme Court...
The officer's actions?
Correct. The U.S. Supreme Court has told us in case law, Graham versus Connor, that they have to look at the situation from the perspective of the officer at the time. It's frequently, these things are dynamic, they're fluid, they're changing, and you're not allowed to Monday morning quarterback these things, which is why, and you know, so the judge went through some of that in his ruling yesterday when he acquitted him. Of course, that was based on causation, but if you can let me put on my police officer hat just for a minute and dust that off and put it back on, that was extremely foolish. When you are faced with potentially a life-threatening situation where someone might be armed, you do not get on the hood of the car, placing yourself directly in the line of fire.
But he said he thought his life was in jeopardy as that of his fellow officers, and that's why he got on the hood of the car and unloaded.
That's what he said, but that's not how police are trained. You're trained to take cover and to then reassess and then to make a decision after that. I can't find any police instructor anywhere who will tell me that that was a wise thing to do.
Right, and even the police chief would end up saying that it's not something that is in step with training. However, now moving forward, there's been some criticism from people within Cleveland and those who are looking outside in, saying it may have been a mistake for the prosecutor, Tim McGinty, to just single out one officer of the 13 and charge, ×2 voluntary manslaughter. Even the mayor, Frank Jackson, had said early on that he thought it was going to be difficult to win a conviction on that kind of charge imposed on one officer. Will that be something that the Justice Department reviews, the appropriateness, or even would it be possible that the prosecutor would go back and say, I'm reassessing, there might be other charges, other officers involved here? If
they couldn't get a conviction in this particular case, and the reason he was singled out, Fred, was because he went the extra step. He continued shooting after the other officers had stopped. He did what I said a moment ago, the foolish thing of getting on the hood of the car and firing into the windshield. That was why he was singled out, because his conduct went far beyond the conduct of the other officers. The prosecutor has essentially conceded the point that all of the other shots that were fired were objectively reasonable as required by law. So I think they have an uphill battle convicting any of these officers. Time will tell, because, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, that's the highest standard of proof known to our law. And if they could not convict him, given the facts of this case, they may have trouble with the remaining officers that are facing charges.
So really at this point, it is really the only what's next step is going to be the Department and that review as it pertains to how this case was argued, how it was settled.
Right. The Justice Department is not really going to have a say in the way the prosecutor strategized and how they presented the case and that sort of thing. They're going to look at whether or not there were any federal constitutional issues, things like that, that could give rise to perhaps federal civil rights charges like we saw following the Rodney King case. There were state acquittals but federal convictions. Whether or not this rises to that level, time will tell.
All right. Thanks so much, Philip Holloway. Always good to see you. Appreciate it. All right. Still ahead.